Voice of the customer drove milkshake development. Virtually any menu item, even if it was originally maybe fostered by an operator. The milkshake idea was fostered by a couple of operators.
Oh, really?
But what cracked the code was two components. Was voice of the customer on the exact final recipes, and then our ability to work with outside suppliers to develop a spinner that could handle the volume, because everything on the market couldn't. They literally burned up. Our volume was. And the same thing happened with grilled chicken. The voice of the customer influenced the recipe design, but then we had to work with suppliers to create a grill, and we had to do this twice because grilled chicken today is second generation.
This is the Brandon Smith Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of the show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. So our topic today, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about leadership, as we always do on this show. We're going to talk about culture, as we frequently do on this show. And then we're going to get to talk about one of my favorite company examples, Chick-fil-A. And so to kind of blend all those three things together, I have the absolute pleasure of having an amazing guest on the show. So Steve Robinson. Steve, so you are a speaker, author, and the former chief marketing officer for Chick-fil-A.
That is correct.
How long were you with Chick-fil-A?
Well, I was on staff for 35 years, believe it or not. Never thought that would happen.
35 years.
Well,
Fantastic.
When I joined, let me qualify that. When I joined them in 1981, I'd already been working professionally for 8 years. In those 8 years with Texas Instruments and Six Flags, I'd had 4 different jobs. So when Truett Cathy was interviewing me, he said, if you come here, it's my expectation you'll never work anywhere else.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there dumbfounded. And he looked at me and he said, because if you come here, it's because we know we can have fun together and we can trust you. And I'm going to expect you to do what I don't want to do. He literally said, whatever it is you need to do for Chick-fil-A, I don't want to do it. So my experience there was a complete paradigm shift for my first 8 years.
You know, I've done a lot of these shows now. This is probably show about 150, and I don't think I've ever jumped into the meat of a show that quickly. That is really good. Right there, you already gave a couple of huge leadership nuggets out of the gate.
Well, when I give my speeches, I always start with my last interview with Truett before I was ever hired. And it was at the back end of a 5-month process. And I literally asked him, Truett, what are you looking for in the ideal candidate in the marketing job? Because they didn't have a marketing department. I was director of marketing at Six Flags over Georgia, and they had recruited me to literally help start a marketing department for them. And this was in 1980. They had about 130 mall stores, but they had no marketing support for the operator family. And so I said, Truett, what are you looking for in the ideal marketing candidate? And he literally said in his little squeaky voice, I have no idea. All I know, whatever it is, I don't want to do it.
That's a really good Truett, actually. That's a really good
And then
Truett.
He said,
it feels like he's here again.
Yeah.
It's good.
I can see him sitting on the couch. And he said, but this is what I do know. If you come here, it's my expectation you'll never leave. And it's because we can trust each other and have fun together. Then he said, Brandon, we don't train culture here, we hire it.
Ah, interesting.
The most
Profound.
important, this was the last thing he said, the most important thing we do here is decide who we invite into the business. So I had a cultural crash course during an interview.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how important it was until I started working there. And as the years unfolded, I always went back to that interview with Truett.
So just to set up the show for folks listening, the way that we're going to do this show is we're really going to kind of walk
Am I screwing it up already?
No, this is going to be beautiful because we're going to start at the begining, and I really want this just be a fun story about hearing some of those big moments in your career.
Well, we started at the beginning.
We did. It was a perfect starting place, and some of those things that are just maybe commonsensical to you because you experienced it, but so different for the rest of the world. And the starting story was a great nugget of that.
Yes.
Most folks don't do that.
Yes,
most folks say we'll hire somebody and we'll then train culture.
Well, that's why I said it was a paradigm buster for me, because at Texas Instruments and then Six Flags, the priority around selecting people was their skill set.
Yeah.
And what can they do in terms of performance to push the business ahead? I understand that. But what I learned not only in that interview, but subsequently really learned as I came to work with Truett and Chick-fil-A was what Truett was really telling you. Yeah, we care about competency, but we care even more about chemistry and character.
Yeah.
Can you work with people? Can you create fellowship, not because of position power, but because people enjoy following your leadership, trust your leadership? And are you someone that we can trust in terms of your character, your judgment, your word is your word?
Yeah.
If I have those things, I think that's what Troy was telling me. If I have those things, then I don't want to do whatever it is you need to do, and I'm going to empower you. And that's exactly what he did. I'll jump to another nugget.
Okay.
I was there 35 years, and you know how many times he brought me into his office to say, Steve, you screwed up, or I do not understand why you did that.
How many? Oh, big fat zero.
Zero.
Okay.
Now, as I tell in the book, I made some mistakes, some of them doozies, and even some of those were points of learning that were kind of mind-boggling. But he never did anything to undermine my confidence and his trust in me. And as a result of that, over the years, I felt the freedom to think outside the box, to bring kind of fast food paradigm busting ideas to the table, whether it was menu ideas or marketing ideas or sponsorship ideas or even how we structured the marketing plan, the evolution of the plan. He never once fundamentally asked me anything other than this: do you think it'll be good for the business and our reputation?
Oh, nice.
He trusted me to do the homework.
Okay. All right. There's so much I want to talk about. Okay. So we're going to get to this. So I want to go back to those 5 months where he's
the interview
interviewing.
process. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he and several dozen other people.
Yeah. Well, which has been, I'm assuming that's still the case today because in my interactions with Chick-fil-A, and I was telling someone yesterday about how long that process is, and they said, gosh, that seems long. So many people involved. Yes. And it sounds like it was so much about characters being so much a piece of that, right?
Yes.
So what do you think he was teasing out? What were some, because I can tell you every single one of the listeners right now who has teams and they hire people would love to be able to say, I've hired someone so great that I can just trust them, empower them, and let them go. And so clearly he was looking for that. What were some things that he did to tease that out?
Well, it was not just Truett. It was Jimmy Collins, his COO, who was the guy who actually reached out to me about being a candidate for the job, and several other people in the business. But they were looking for things like, how do you spend your free time? How do you invest in the community? Tell me about your kids. What do you love to do with your kids? What do you like to read? What do you and your wife Diane like to do together? What are the businesses out there that you really admire? Things that would give insight to fundamentally how I look at life, how I make choices, how I invest time, and how I invest money. And there's an old adage: if you want to find out what's really important to somebody, look at their calendar and look at their checkbook.
Yeah.
And they kind of did, side door questions to vet that without doing anything that was against the law.
Yeah.
But to understand who I was beyond just a marketing professional.
So you're full of nuggets. I mean, so many nuggets. Because so right there,
it was 35 years, Brian.
but I want to call them out because they can easily wash over us if we're not really intentional. So he was looking at how you look at life, your outlook on life.
Yes.
How you make decisions.
Yes, that's right.
How you use your time.
Right.
And invest your time.
Right.
And how you invest your money.
Right. Now, he also wanted to know, what do you think were some of the greatest contributions you made to Texas Instruments and to Six Flags?
Yep.
Which gave him insight in terms of how I thought strategically and how I drove innovation and performance of those organizations. But he really cared a lot about, can I trust you and can we have fun together? I mean, he said it, but it was crucial to him. And you need to understand that on his desk was his favorite Bible verse, literally his life verse, Proverbs 22:1. A good name is to be more valued than great riches. And as I had that conversation with him, as I'm leaving, I said, Truett, I really appreciate your Bible verse there. And I said, that could very easily be the definition of what a great brand is. It's a promise people can trust. And over time, I learned, Brandon, that he filtered a lot of his own decision making, and he would challenge me and other leaders. Is this decision, is this initiative, is this investment going to build the reputation of Chick-fil-A or put it at risk? Sometimes leading to not just a yes or a no, but a pause. Let's think and pray about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't first, how's it going to affect sales and profits? He didn't care about it. He was not motivated by growth. He cared about financial health, but he was not motivated by growth. Cash flow was important to him, but he was not motivated by growth. He was motivated by having a business that created an environment where people could thrive, not just his leadership team, but everybody associated with Chick-fil-A. Every Chick-fil-A operator, team member, every staff member. Can we create an environment and a business where everybody's giftedness, not just professionally, but personally, spiritually, intellectually, giftedness can thrive? Now, I didn't understand all that in that 5-month interview process, but as my career unfolded, I understood it, and I aspired to recreate it in the business. And that's the masterful thing he did. He attracted leaders, and by his example, not just his words, more by his examples, he taught us how he wanted us to lead and make decisions. And so we operated in the box top of what was important to the founder.
Yeah. So now you've gotten hired. They said, Steve, we'd love to have you kind of part of the team.
January 12th, 1981.
All right. The anniversary's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're going to be giving away a couple copies of this, Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, How Faith, Cows, and Chicken Built an Iconic Brand. So this is your book.
It is.
And there's so many good stories in this, but and I want folks to buy the book and get the book from the show.
Yep.
But let's fast forward a little bit. So what was maybe one of the first big experiences that you had now sitting in that marketing seat?
Yes.
That you started to learn either more about the business or even about the culture or leadership?
Yeah. I'll share two real quick. I'll try to make it quick, but they're interconnected. I alluded to one, he never called me to his office to say you screwed up. Well, a year and a half into my career there, I was not the sole driver, but I was part of a decision to run a national promotion that quite frankly looked a lot like other fast food promotions that use coupons and discounting and deals and newspaper inserts and direct mail and trying to drive traffic to the stores. And my input was principally on the marketing plan. They'd kind of already set the creative idea before I got there. Anyway, I goosed up the media plan. And the net result of it is it goosed up the results of the promotion, and we went $2 million over budget. Now, I'm not talking about $2 million over going through the store P&Ls. It was $2 million over the corporate budget because anything over a certain number, the home office covered for the operators. Now, we're only about a $120 million business at that point in gross sales, and here we have a $2 million overage, and it's a big hit on cash flow, and it falls right in the middle in 1982 when interest rates are over 18%. Mall development has come to a screeching halt. Retail sales are going through the tank, and Truett has signed a personal note to build the first $10 million office building.
Okay.
So I'm literally. I'm thinking about.
I don't know if I wanted to be you at that time,
It was
Steve.
not good. I'm thinking about hiring guards to keep my yard from being salted by the finance people. Okay, the operators their kitchen staffs are practically killing themselves giving away all this food, and so within a week of realizing that this thing's totally exploded, I go into Jimmy Collins' office, the CEO, and I apologize. I said, Jimmy, just quite frankly, I was too aggressive. Probably two factors: arrogance and lack of information. And I need to apologize for that. He said, well, you don't need to apologize. I was part of the decision too, and I've already told Truett I was part of the decision. And I said, well, do I need to go to Truett and apologize? He said, no, don't do that. And he said, in fact, right now would not be a good time. He said, but then he looked at me and he said, I don't want you to worry about it because we just invested $2 million in your education, and you're never going to make that mistake again. That's a quote, and it's in my book.
Yeah.
Now, I was floored. This man, not only did Truett have my back, even though I didn't have a conversation with him. Jimmy had my back, and it reinforced that conversation we were having earlier, that when you work in an environment like that and you realize, okay, these folks are giving me room to take risks and innovate, it fostered in me a confidence that, okay, I don't want to be stupid, but there's room to do things here that will drive innovative behavior in the marketplace. I didn't know what it would look like. The second key thing it did was it drove me and the entire executive committee literally on our knees, because we had a financial crisis. And we went off site for 2.5 days with Truett and we said, we got to do something to curb expenses. We cut expenses, we froze hiring, we cut the number of stores we got to build, because, I mean, Truett's personal name was on that note, for example. Business was at risk.
Yeah.
We did all that stuff in a matter of a day, and I'll shorten the story to say
This was 82?
This is 82. I'll shorten the story to say the next day and a half, we dealt with the bigger question. We got a young organization that needs to understand what's really important at Chick-fil-A. Is it cash flow? Is it growing sales? Is it profits? No, it's why we exist.
Yeah.
It's our purpose. And Truett proceeded to share with this young executive team his perspective of what Chick-fil-A was, why he was in business. He saw the business as a gift from God. He'd had other crises in his life. He'd had health crises. He'd had a store burned down. He had one that failed. This was not his first rodeo with a crisis. And he wanted all of us and operators and staff to understand, this is not my business. The sandwich in the business is a gift from God. Our responsibility is to steward the gift. And that yielded a conversation that led to the writing of the Chick-fil-A corporate purpose in that little hotel room in Lake Lanier. That clearly states Chick-fil-A exists to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that exists in the business, that all we steward in the business, and have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Not one word of the purpose has changed. It's still on a bronze plaque in front of that first office building. And so I tell you that story within my first year and a half. I have a crisis of poor judgment. We have a macro crisis of cash flow, and we get clarity about why the business exists and how the founder looks at it. And it freed the entire organization to step back and say, look, if you can align with his purpose, there's room here to lead, innovate, exercise your own giftedness, and quite frankly, exercise your own faith in the marketplace. The next year we had a 36% sales increase. Same-store sales were up 29%. Now, we had rolled out Chick-fil-A nuggets. That helped.
Yeah.
But the point is, the economic environment hadn't improved that much.
Yeah.
People, it was like a cloud broke away. People relaxed. And everybody was, I don't know, we only had one executive committee member within a year choose to leave. And I don't know that we had any operators leave or other staff leave. So anyway, there's one very early experience that changed my perspective, but actually brought clarity to the entire business for Chick-fil-A.
I think that's the key word, is clarity. So we're at break. So when we come back from break, I want to continue. So we've got this part of the story where you've joined, and immediately things start to go into a little bit of what seems like a ditch.
Yes.
And then this light just kind of starts to pull it out. And so well, we're still in the 80s, so we got to catch all the way up, Steve. Yeah. So when we come back, I want to hear kind of what was maybe the next big profound thing that happened.
Sure.
Or that you got to be kind of a hand in as you kind of shaped Chick-fil-A, and even how we experience it in the market today.
Sure.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Here's your coaching minute for the week, presented to you by the Leadership Foundry. So building credibility is essential to us as leaders, both in terms of working with our team, but also in terms of building credibility with others. One of the easy ways to do that is to focus on being more responsive. How responsive are you to emails, whether it's from your team or other leaders? That is as a good friend of mine and regular guest on my podcast, John Kim, says, responsiveness is cheap currency. And what John means by that is it's really easy to do, but it goes a long way. I had a leader I worked with several years ago, and he would typically respond to emails 4 to 6 weeks after they were sent, and he had no credibility with his team. So here's a challenge for you. Work on your responsiveness. Can you respond to emails within 24 to 48 hours? Now, what that doesn't mean is you have to respond with an answer. It can just simply mean, hey, I got it. I'll get back to you by whatever date. But by focusing on responsiveness, that can enhance your credibility. So give it a try. Welcome back from break. Of course, before break, we were talking about, and so Steve Robinson, Steve was educating me on kind of his journey at Chick-fil-A and some of that, or those early years, which is just an amazing story about how things were maybe not looking the brightest. And then we have this purpose statement, and then even just the culture and leadership and some of the things that make Chick-fil-A so unique.
Yep.
So here we are, 1982. 83 sees this turn.
Yes.
I think you said, was it 36% in revenue?
Yes.
29% in same store
growth.
Which, of course, in your world, same store growth
That's
is
health.
That is, yes. That's the number that everyone really watches.
Right.
So now we're at 83, 84. What was maybe the next kind of moment you think of in your journey where you say, "Gosh, that really was significant to the brand, but also significant to you personally"?
Well, the next one followed on the heels of the 82 crisis, and quite frankly, the 82 crisis was a catalyst for it. That experience made it very clear to us that if we were going to continue to have opportunities for operators and staff, because again, Truett was not motivated by growth, but he loved attracting new talent into the business. It wasn't going to be the mall business. That wave, if you will, was over. And so even at Lake Lanier, we started talking about, all right, do we need to start thinking about how do we go on the street?
So you all recognized that in 82, 83, that the malls were not going to be the future of the company.
When you got mall developers literally walking away from projects that are already starting to come out of the ground, you can't pin your future to that. And so, that was all part of that conversation that we had at Lake Lanier. It was probably one of the most productive 2.5 days we ever spent together. So we started working for 2 years, started working on a freestanding concept to go on the street. We decided, let's get an A-plus location. Let's be very, very close to all the major brands that we would have to compete with. And we found a location in Briar Cliff and North Druid Hills here in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. It literally was within 200 yards of a Burger King and an Arby's and a McDonald's and a Wendy's. And our attitude was, if we can win there, we can win anywhere. And we did a bunch of customer research. What would Chick-fil-A on the street, what would you expect it to look like? How would you expect to perform? What would you expect, if any, changes to the menu, et cetera? I won't bore you with all the details. The net of all that was it literally got designed not so much on computers as you would today, but in foam core on the top floor of the new office building where we had empty space. We were designing the store and the equipment in 3-dimensional, and down to the drive-through and the kitchen layouts and everything. It opened in 1986. In its first year, it did more than double what we thought it would do. It did not open with a Chick-fil-A operator because we didn't want to assume that the operator model was necessarily the right model for a freestanding restaurant. Now, the operator model was and is a crucial component to the Chick-fil-A concept. They're independent contractors. They don't own the assets. Chick-fil-A finds a site and builds a restaurant, but then Chick-fil-A basically subleases the brand and those assets to an independent contractor. The operator pays a percentage of gross off the top for the brand and all the support services. After all their expenses, we split the operating bottom line with them 50-50. The question was whether that, which was already in place in the malls, whether that would work in the freestanders. After the first year, we decided we're not going to change the deal. We're not going to do a different deal. We're going to migrate exactly the same concept into the freestander. And so North Druid got converted to a traditional operator model. and it did well the first year, but then it really took off because you had a full-time, dedicated, completely engaged leader, and that is still the key to Chick-fil-A's growth and community engagement is because of these highly engaged leaders in the business. They're not just running a restaurant; they're running an enterprise, but they're also representing and building their brand and the brand in the communities they serve. So that was a turning point, and then we had to innovate not only the store design, but we had to innovate the menu. Very clear we had to add breakfast. And so that was
because you didn't really have that before.
So to your question, one of the other major turning points was a decision I had to kind of drive in the business. We're gonna do this innovation stuff based upon what customers tell us, not what does Truett want or what Jimmy want or what operators want. Well, let's design for example, the breakfast menu to be unique and what customers want, but at the same time, we don't want it to be like Arby's or Hardee's or McDonald's. Voice of the customer started to raise its head in the business, and as I like to say, became the top constituent in the business. Voice of the customer drove innovation, still drives innovation at Chick-fil-A. It trumps operators and it trumps leadership. And it drove innovation not only for the first breakfast menu, but later for the waffle fries. Truett thought waffle fries, and Jimmy did too, thought bad idea. Customers loved them, and within a year after introducing them, fry sales doubled.
Oh, wow.
They didn't think grilled chicken was a good idea. Customers did. Their voice drove innovation. Their voice helped design literally the recipe. Within a year and a half, it was over 6% of sales, which is a big number. Voice of the customer drove milkshake development. Virtually any menu item, even if it was originally maybe fostered by an operator, the milkshake idea was fostered by a couple of operators.
Oh, really?
But what cracked the code was two components: was voice of the customer on the exact final recipes, and then our ability to work with outside suppliers to develop a spinner that could handle the volume, because everything on the market couldn't. They literally burned up. Our volume was. And the same thing happened with grilled chicken. The voice of the customer influenced the recipe design, but then we had to work with suppliers to create a grill, and we had to do this twice because grilled chicken today is second generation. Had to design a grill that would not only give the flavor Chick-fil-A wanted, but would stand up to the volume. So that led to, I'm giving you a lot here, but voice of the customer led to menu and equipment R&D actually coming into marketing, not operations.
Yeah.
And a lot of the innovation that goes on at Chick-fil-A, if it doesn't report directly into marketing, it is highly influenced by marketing because of the voice of the customer research systems that Chick-fil-A has today. So those are a couple of big turning points.
Okay, I heard a whole lot of things in there. So let me play back 4 or 5 things I heard.
Sure.
That I think are unique. So the first one goes back when you said, okay, well, let's enter into freestanding.
Yes.
And so what was interesting, which I think a lot of folks would do, is they would say, well, let's go pick this little place over there where nobody is. We'll put a freestander over there. We can control it, a little microcosm.
No.
Chick-fil-A said, no, we're going to stick it right in the middle of everything.
Right.
Go right in the middle of that red ocean and see how we can, see how we do.
Right.
So that was one. And then ultimately the decision to say, we're going to stick with the operator model, and the operator model by itself is a huge innovation.
Absolutely.
Which really is very similar to the way that you said Truett hired you. This idea of we're going to partner together.
Yes.
It's going to be this kind of lifetime partnership.
I'm going to release you.
And I'm going to release you, and I'm going to trust you, but I'm going to really select you based on character.
Yes.
And then because you're going to represent us.
Correct.
And there's that component to it too. And then the whole idea that what really drives innovation is the customers and then the operators, not necessarily home office.
That's correct.
And then I think what everyone who knows Chick-fil-A today can attest to is that, and you talk about when decisions are made, you have to consider volume.
That's correct.
Because volume is so.
That's correct.
Such a factor with Chick-fil-A's business today.
That's correct.
So much volume.
Truett used to tell our VP of supply chain, his name was Sonny Newton. Sonny asked Truett once, he said, Truett, what's your number one expectation of me? And Truett said, don't run out of chicken. Embedded in that, he's really saying, don't run out of anything. Never disappoint a customer. So whether it's supply chain or whether it's equipment's ability to keep up or the throughput capabilities of the unit or the drive-through, don't run out of chicken.
Yeah.
Don't disappoint the customer. He never wanted to lose anyone in the interaction with Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I talk about like the Chick-fil-A milkshake, for example, often people will then bring up stories of other competitors, not naming any names, and their biggest frustration is always their machine's always broken down.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's a little thing that maybe sometimes we might not notice because we always get the milkshake when we go through the drive-through, but it's because the machine's not broken down.
Well, I tip of the hat to our engineering group that was led by Roger Shealy. It took over 2 years to work with a supplier to develop the spinner that wouldn't break down, that wouldn't burn up. And the same thing happened with grill. It took over 2 years to develop a custom grill that gave it the texture and the product we wanted, but also could handle the volume. So that's not uncommon at Chick-fil-A. I think embedded in this story, let me move ahead a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Because of that operator being at the core of the business, and they did thrive in free standards. They certainly still do. We saw the ability to do something that you just alluded to, and you didn't know you were doing it. You said we went right in the middle of that red ocean. Well, we saw the ability to figure out a way to be right in the middle of the red ocean and create a blue ocean. And there's a book by that title.
Yeah, there is.
And didn't know it at the time, but that strategy, how do we develop a brand and a customer experience that is unlike anything else around us, even though we're in the midst of them, drove an attitude, a further, I guess you'd say, evolution of innovation at Chick-fil-A, where we took, I like to call it an attitude of what's the renegade position? What is the position that no one else either has with menu, with service, with drive-through, whatever the issue is, with technology? Not only they don't have, but because of the operator being the leader and the implementer, they can't recreate it. Competitors can't recreate it. The competitors cannot recreate the drive-through experience at Chick-fil-A. Now, Chick-fil-A has designed stores and technology to facilitate that drive-through experience, but operators are the ones that are hiring the leadership and the talent team that makes that part of the engine run. It's operators who have the capability of building a team that deliver hospitality. By the way, a model that took 7 years to develop and test and prove. Because of the operator model, they can deliver hospitality that's genuine, respectful, caring, and they can do it consistently because they're not in and out. They're not an owner that's off site. They're a passive owner. They're an active on-site owner. Yeah. And those team members work for them. And Chick-fil-A's job is to design a hospitality model that they can execute that is consistent with the values of Chick-fil-A. And quite frankly, Chick-fil-A has to say to the operators, okay, this is just as important as 2 pickles on the sandwich. This hospitality model must be consistent every day, every place.
Yeah.
That was harder than any menu innovation we ever did.
Yeah.
But my point is the operator model that Truett created gave Chick-fil-A the operating platform to create a blue ocean brand.
Yeah.
And my team, our role was to put the voice of the customer in the center of that. We eventually developed literally an innovation process, an innovation center that leadership and marketing ran and operated, and they still do today, that the entire business uses for any type of innovation. But we always use the same innovation model, and it starts and it ends with the customer. And the innovation process is the same, whether it's a menu item or a technology issue or a store design issue or a packaging issue. Doesn't matter what it is. The process is the same. And the voice of the customer has a role in every one of them.
Yeah.
So if you like, for example, the Chick-fil-A One app, it took several years to develop, but it was a customer-centric development. and it's not like any other fast food app out there. And you say, well, how? Because it's fundamentally booted in relationship. You open the app and the first thing you see is a video from the operator closest to wherever you sit, welcoming you to Chick-fil-A. And, hey, I'm Joe Smith, and I run this store just down the street. Let me tell you about my family. I'd love to have you come see us. And if you see me in the store, look me up, say something. Well, nobody else can do that because the managers come and go. We've got operators who are committed to their stores, committed to their communities, and you can put them on the opening page of an app and know that they're going to deliver.
You know, Steve, we could talk for a long time on this because
that's why I wrote the book.
That's why people need to buy the book. So I want to end our conversation by two other kind of final takeaways I had from there, and they're more on strategy. So for everyone even thinking about running their own kind of divisions or businesses, the first one was, if we really step back at Chick-fil-A, you live in a very competitive industry, quick service restaurants with slim margins and quick discounting.
Yes.
And Chick-fil-A's found a way in that red ocean to carve out that blue ocean.
That's correct.
And using people and culture and service as that competitive edge that's really hard to replicate because it is so hard to copy culture.
Yes.
And so using that as kind of one of the ways to differentiate, preserve margins, preserve relationships, all that stuff that makes you so successful. And then I think that's not unrelated to your innovation cycles, because I think with that loyalty that customers give you, it allows Chick-fil-A the opportunity to innovate and take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to kind of get things right. And then, but you were also very intentional about taking 2 and 3 and 4 years to get things right.
Correct.
So it's not just rushed out the gate and then it's a bad experience.
We don't want to add anything to the Chick-fil-A brand, whether it's menu or any other facet of the brand. We don't want to add anything to the Chick-fil-A brand that doesn't add value to the brand for the customer. Because if it adds value to the brand, building reputation, which is so important to Truett, if it adds to the reputation of the brand, then they will come more often, they'll tell others, and they'll pay full price gladly. And part of my 1982 learning around that couponing, I didn't tell you this part, but I swore then we're never going to coupon or discount Chick-fil-A again. And we didn't.
Yeah.
So you got to build a brand that people love and are willing to pay full price for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting because in Chick-fil-A, you always pay the price on the menu unless you get a Be Our Guest. That's right.
Free. Yes.
Right. And then it's a Be Our Guest card.
Yes.
And then
if we promote food, we give it away, either literally on site somewhere or with a Be Our Guest invitation.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Steve, this was an absolute joy and pleasure.
Yeah.
So I always ask all my guests this question. What is one life hack you might have for us to help us live a life more free from dysfunction, whether personally or professionally?
Oh, my goodness. I could give you several. One that comes to mind immediately, which was impactful in my life, I saw Truett have a desire to never have debt in the business, and there were seasons when we had a lot of debt. And he literally came to the executive committee when he turned 80 and said, no guy who's 80 should have $250 million worth of debt. And I'd always seen him steward the business through tithing. He tithed the business fundamentally. But this whole attitude about debt was transformative, not just for me, but for the business. We got out of debt. And my point of picking that one, Brandon, is once you are out of debt, you are freer to respond to opportunities and to respond to promptings of the Holy Spirit. If you're in debt, it's hard sometimes to pursue an opportunity, or it's hard to do what the Lord's prompting you to do to support some ministry or something at the church. And I think too many businesses, for the sake of growth, they chase growth and they use other people's money, whether it's traditional bank debt or equity markets, and they outstrip their ability to support the growth, which is my second point. Once we got fully dependent upon cash flow, it forced us to make harder choices. You have to say no more than you can say yes. And you got to value initiatives and potential investments at a higher pecking order, and you have to draw the line sooner to say no. And I think it was a stroke of genius. And I think it was fostered by him being part of the greatest generation and coming through the Great Depression. But I would urge anyone out there, not just business, but professionally, get out of debt, and you will experience an unusual sense, not only of peace, but you'll experience financial freedom that's amazing. And Chick-fil-A has benefited from the backside of that, the discipline that came out of that.
Yeah.
And so have I in my own life.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So if people want to learn more about you, get a copy of the book or buy a book.
Sure. Buy several.
Buy several. Give them to friends.
Yes, it's Christmas. Or
Exactly.
New Year's, whatever.
Exactly. Where could they go?
Well, it's on Amazon. There's hard copy. I think they're coming out with a soft copy. There's also an audio version. You can find it at Barnes & Noble's. I dropped in there 2 days ago.
It's Covert Cows in Chick-fil-A.
Yes. Hold it up to the camera so they can see. There you go.
And we'll take a picture of it, and I'll be giving out copies. Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, How Faith, Cows, and Chicken Built an Iconic Brand. And there your name is, Steve Robinson.
Yeah. An incredible blessing. Amazing journey.
And if people want to find more about you, where can they go?
srobinson.com. I have a website. Okay. srobinson.consulting.com.
srobinson.consulting.com.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you.
My pleasure.
Absolute
Enjoyed
joy.
It. Thanks, Brandon.
And thank you for listening and watching the show. Of course, keep up the fight against dysfunction every week and watch a new show. And if you haven't subscribed on iTunes, please subscribe. And if you are subscribed, rate, review, and let others know about our show so they can find us and we can increase our tribe. And until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.